Sierra James didn't expect her entire life to unravel before noon, and definitely not in the middle of a Manhattan sidewalk holding a half-soggy cardboard box and her last shred of dignity. "Watch it!" A cab honked as she stumbled off the curb, catching herself just before she dropped her box of belongings. Her heels skidded on the wet pavement and her heart thundered in her chest. Of course it would rain, of course she'd get fired. And of course her ex would cheat on her with her roommate the same week her landlord raised the rent. Perfect timing, universe, just perfect. "Are you okay?" a voice asked, deep and warm. Sierra blinked through the drizzle to find a man standing beside her, holding a large black umbrella over both of them. He was tall, in a dark wool coat, with a jawline that looked like it could cut glass and eyes sharp enough to notice everything, especially her embarrassment. "I'm fine," she muttered, brushing hair from her face. "Just lost my job, stepped into traffic, got rained on, Tuesday." The man didn't laugh. He crouched beside her instead, gently lifting the edge of her water-damaged box. "These your things?" she nodded, cheeks burning. He plucked a framed photo from the top and wiped off a smear of rain with his thumb. "You want help getting somewhere?" he asked. "You're soaked." "I'll be fine. You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted, voice low but steady. "At least let me walk you somewhere dry." Sierra hesitated. He didn't look like a creep. Actually, he looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine, but there was something calm in the way he spoke, something kind in his eyes, and honestly, she didn't have the energy to say no. "Okay," she said softly. They walked 3 blocks under his large umbrella, her heels clicking against the cracked sidewalk, his coat shielding her from the wind. She felt ridiculous, and still somehow seen. "I'm Quinn Keller," he said as they reached a covered coffee shop patio. He held the door open for her. "Sierra James." He smiled at her name like it mattered, like he'd remember it. Inside, the warm scent of espresso and fresh pastries wrapped around them. Quinn ordered her a chai latte and handed it to her without asking. She blinked. "How'd you know this is my favorite?" he shrugged. "Lucky guess." They sat at a small corner table. Sierra wrapped her hands around the paper cup and tried to ignore how her heart fluttered any time he glanced at her. "So," he said, resting his chin on his hand. "What happened?" She didn't mean to tell him everything. But once she started about her horrible boss, her breakup, the rent, it all came pouring out. Quinn listened without interrupting. No judgment, no pity. Just this steady, grounding presence that made her feel like maybe the world wasn't completely awful. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "You deserve better than all of that," Sierra laughed dryly. "Well, unless you're secretly offering me a job or a place to live, I think I'm out of luck." Something flickered in his eyes, but it passed too quickly for her to catch. "I'm not," he said slowly. "But I know someone who might be." She raised an eyebrow. "What, you know a guy?" He smiled. "Something like that." They talked for almost 2 hours. She learned he'd just come back to the city after being overseas for a while, something about family and business. He didn't go into details, and she didn't press. He seemed careful with his words, but never cold. When they stood to leave, Sierra hesitated. "You really didn't have to spend your morning rescuing a total stranger." Quinn looked at her, then really looked at her. "You're not a stranger anymore." Her breath caught. "And for what it's worth," he added, "you've got the kind of smile people don't forget." Sierra didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. He helped her carry her box to the subway, offered his jacket. She refused, and then handed her a sleek black business card. "If you ever need anything, call this number, ask for me." She took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Quinn." He nodded, then turned and walked away. No dramatic farewell, no awkward lingering. Just a man who appeared like a storm and left just as fast. Sierra stared at the card. No company name, just a single name, Keller, and a number she didn't call, but she thought about him every day after that. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that Quinn Keller wasn't just a kind stranger. He was the millionaire owner of Keller Holdings, and he couldn't stop thinking about her smile. The first time Sierra saw him again, 3 weeks had passed and she still hadn't called the number. She was balancing a tray of croissants and espresso shots in the back hallway of the Lenox Hotel, trying not to slip on the polished marble floor, when the elevator doors slid open and he stepped out like the universe had decided to mess with her again. Only this time, he wasn't holding an umbrella. He was flanked by two impeccably dressed men in tailored charcoal suits and a woman with a tablet moving at his side like a shadow. Sierra froze, tray trembling in her hands. He didn't notice her at first. He was mid-conversation, his voice clipped and focused. "Have the proposal on my desk by 3. If the numbers don't make sense, we're pulling out." "Yes, Mr. Keller," the assistant replied. "Mr. Keller." The tray tilted slightly. One espresso tipped and landed on her shoe, burning through her sock. She gasped, fumbling to steady the tray. Porcelain clinked against metal, his head turned. Their eyes locked. Quinn's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise breaking through the steel calm. He stepped toward her before anyone else could react. "Sierra," she blinked. "You this what? Are you okay?" He glanced down at her foot, where espresso soaked through canvas. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," she said quickly, adjusting the tray. "Just didn't expect to see you here." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You work at the Lennox." "I started 2 weeks ago." She gestured vaguely to her uniform. "Room service, not exactly glamorous, but it's a paycheck." Quinn didn't respond right away. His gaze dropped to the tray, then returned to her face, unreadable. "Come with me. I have a delivery, I'll take care of it," he said, turning to the concierge who had just stepped off the elevator. "Room 917, take this up." The young man blinked but nodded, reaching for the tray. Sierra hesitated. Quinn's voice softened. "Please?" She followed him down a hallway lined with thick cream carpet and gold-plated sconces. No one else spoke. His team peeled off at the corner, giving them space as he opened the door to a suite, not just any suite. The CEO penthouse. She stepped inside slowly. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting. The furniture was all velvet and marble, with a fireplace flickering beneath a glass sculpture. She turned in a slow circle. "You live here?" she asked. "For now." He loosened his tie with one hand. "I use the Lennox when I'm in the city." She turned to face him. "So you're Keller?" He didn't look away. "Yes," Sierra swallowed. "You didn't say anything?" "You didn't ask." He said it gently, without accusation. "And I didn't want you to treat me differently. You helped me in the rain and then just disappeared." "I didn't disappear, I gave you my number. I thought you were a consultant or something, not the guy who owns half the skyline." "I don't own half the skyline," he replied. "Just a few pieces of it." She gave him a look. He exhaled slowly. "I wasn't trying to trick you." "Then what were you doing?" "I was trying to forget my life for a minute," he said. "And then I met you." Sierra's heart thudded. "I thought about calling," she said quietly, "but you felt not real." His jaw flexed slightly. "I was real that day, I'm real now." There was a beat of silence, thick and charged. Then he crossed the room and opened a drawer in the sideboard. He pulled out a small black box and turned back to her. "You're not going to want to accept this." "But I'm giving it to you anyway." She stared as he opened the box and revealed a pair of navy suede loafers, the kind that cost more than her rent. "Quinn, you're limping. Your shoe is soaked, and I don't like seeing you hurt. I can't take these." "You're not taking them." "I'm giving them." She hesitated, but something in his voice, quiet, certain, made her reach out and accept the box. Their fingers brushed. Heat licked up her arm. "I don't do this," she said. "Let guys buy me things." "I don't do this either," he replied. She looked up at him. "Then why are you?" "Because you're not like anyone I've ever met, and I haven't stopped thinking about you since the coffee shop." Her breath caught. "I don't know what this is," he said. "But I know I want to see you again. I work 6 days a week. I'll work around your schedule." Sierra studied him. The tailored suit, the polished shoes, the penthouse. He didn't belong in her world, and yet somehow, standing there with him, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. "I get off at 6 tomorrow," she said finally. "I'll be waiting." He walked her back to the staff hallway but didn't touch her, didn't push, just looked at her like she mattered, and when she stepped back into the elevator, her heart was no longer steady. Because the man she thought had been a stranger wasn't just a millionaire. He was the kind of man who remembered a girl's favorite drink, noticed when her shoes hurt, and didn't treat her like she was disposable, and that scared her more than anything. Sierra adjusted the strap of her canvas bag as she stepped out of the employee exit of the Lennox. The evening air was crisp, the sky painted in smoky lavender and charcoal streaks. She wasn't sure what she expected, maybe nothing. maybe everything. But the moment she saw the black vintage Aston Martin parked at the curb, its chrome reflecting the dying light, her pulse skipped like a record in a storm. Quinn stood beside it. No coat this time, just a charcoal sweater and dark slacks, his sleeves pushed to his forearms. His presence was quiet but impossible to ignore. He wasn't looking at his phone, he wasn't pacing. He was waiting with the kind of patience that made her feel like she was worth it. "You drive that?" she asked, stopping short. "I do," he replied. "But only on nights that matter," she raised an eyebrow. "And this one does," his gaze didn't waver. "Yes," she said nothing as he opened the door for her. The leather interior smelled like cedar and something sharper, something expensive she couldn't name. When he slid in beside her, the doors shut with a satisfying click, and the city faded behind them as he pulled into traffic. "Where are we going? You'll see," he said. They drove in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, something easier, the kind that let her breathe. The kind that made her wonder who he was before the suits and the boardrooms. When they stopped, it wasn't at a restaurant or a rooftop bar. It was along the East River, just beyond the industrial docks where the city lights thinned and the water caught the moon in jagged pieces. "There's a place I used to come," he said as they stepped out, "before everything got loud." She followed him along a narrow path, her boots crunching against the gravel. A gate creaked open and revealed a small, fenced-in courtyard tucked behind a collapsed warehouse. It was wild, overgrown, but not forgotten. A wrought iron bench sat beneath a flowering tree that had no business blooming in October. "I found it when I was 16, he said. "Used to sneak out of school, take the train down here and just sit." Sierra looked at him. "This was your escape," he nodded. "It reminded me the world wasn't made entirely of glass towers." They sat. The wind tugged at her sleeves, but she didn't feel cold, not next to him, not here. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Because you're not trying to impress me. You're not looking over my shoulder for someone better. You looked at me like I was a person, not a paycheck. I didn't know who you were." "I know," he glanced at her. "That's what made it real." Sierra folded her hands in her lap. "What happens when this stops feeling real?" "It won't," he said. "Not unless we let it." There was something in his voice that made her chest ache, not desperation, something quieter. A man used to being wanted for everything except who he actually was. "What about you?" he asked. "Why'd you say yes?" she hesitated. "Because you saw me when everything fell apart, and you didn't look away." His expression shifted, something unspoken settling between them. "I never do," he said. They stayed until the sky turned ink black and the wind picked up enough to make her shiver. He noticed immediately and offered her his sweater without a word. She accepted it this time. The drive back was quiet again, but different now. Charged. When he stopped in front of her building, she reached for the door handle but paused. "Do you always do this?" "What? Take girls to secret gardens and share your teenage hideouts?" "No," he said. "Only the ones who make me forget I'm supposed to be someone else." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped out of the car. He didn't follow her to the door. He didn't need to. When she reached her apartment, she found something folded in the pocket of the sweater. A slip of heavy card stock, handwritten, not a receipt, not a note, just a sketch of her laughing. She pressed the paper to her chest, heart loud in the silence. She still didn't know what this was, this thing between them. But for the first time in a long time, she wanted to find out. Sierra stood in the middle of the ballroom beneath a chandelier the size of her old apartment, surrounded by people in floor-length gowns and tuxedos, and tried not to panic. The gold invitation had arrived that morning, slipped under her door with a handwritten note in Quinn's familiar, angled script tonight. Black tie, just trust me, she hadn't expected this. A charity gala for the Keller Foundation, held at the Rosewood Grand, with more press and power in one room than she'd ever seen in her life. Somewhere between the champagne tower and the string quartet, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall and barely recognized herself. The dress had arrived in a flat black box hours before. Midnight blue silk, sleeveless, with a single sweeping shoulder and a whisper of a train. It fit her perfectly, too perfectly, and she didn't ask how he'd known her size. "Try not to look like you want to bolt," Quinn's voice murmured behind her. She turned to find him standing there, dressed in a black tuxedo with a crisp white shirt and no tie, hands in his pockets. He didn't look like a CEO tonight. He looked effortless. Dangerous in the kind of way that made her heart forget how to beat properly. "I don't belong here," she said under her breath. "You belong exactly here. Quinn, this is your world. These people are not here for me tonight," he cut in gently. "They're here because I asked them to come." "But I came for you," her throat tightened. "You're seriously impossible. I've been called worse." A tall man with silver cufflinks approached, smiling. "Mr. Keller, the ambassador is asking for you." Quinn didn't look away from her. "Tell him I'll be there in 5. The man blinked, hesitated, then walked off. "You just blew off a diplomat," Sierra said. "I'll survive." She looked around the room again, the curated flowers, the art installations, the quiet murmurs of donors and executives. "Why bring me into this?" He took her hand, slow and deliberate. "Because I wanted you to see it, not the press version, not the curated articles. This," she frowned. "This what?" He gestured toward a long wall of framed photographs, children in hospitals, women in shelters, schools in countries she couldn't name without a map. "That's what the Keller Foundation does. I used to think success meant money and control. But then I started funding things that actually mattered. You once asked me why I do what I do. This is it." A quiet beat passed. "And I wanted you to see it before you decided whether or not you want to walk away." Sierra's breath caught. "You think I'm going to walk away?" "I think you could," he said softly. "And I wouldn't blame you." She studied him. The man who had found her in the rain and carried nothing but kindness in his hands. The one who never once acted like she owed him gratitude for any of it. "You're wrong," she said. He tilted his head. "About what?" "I'm not afraid of your world," she said. "I'm afraid of getting used to it. Of losing myself in it." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're the only person I've ever met who could walk into a room like this and still be entirely herself." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice barely above the music. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" He nodded. "I asked if you were okay." "I wasn't," she said, "but I think I'm getting there." Quinn's eyes softened. "Come with me." He led her out of the ballroom, down a quiet hall lined with oil paintings and flickering sconces. At the end, a set of tall glass doors opened onto a rooftop garden lit by strings of golden bulbs. The city stretched below, glittering and sprawling and infinite. Sierra turned slowly, the wind lifting her hair. "This is where you disappear when you don't want to be found, isn't it?" He nodded once. "I come up here when I need to remember I'm human." She looked at him for a long moment. "Quinn, why me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing. Not because I could fix anything, just because I existed." She felt her chest twist, emotions raw and real and pulsing. "I still don't know if I'm enough for this," she whispered. "You're not enough for this," he said. "You're beyond it." And then, without another word, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath stopped. He didn't kneel. He didn't get dramatic. He just held the box gently, his fingers steady. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," he said. "I'm asking you to believe in us, in what we are, in what we could be." Her hands shook as she opened the box. Inside, nestled in the velvet, was a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a single charm, a smile, her smile, the one he'd drawn, her eyes filled. "You remembered." "I never forgot." She stepped into him, her arms wrapping around his neck. "I don't want your money. I don't care about the penthouses or the cars. I know. I just want you." "All of you? You already have me." He kissed her then, slow and certain, as the city roared quietly beneath them and the stars blinked overhead like they could see exactly who they were. And for the first time in a long time, Sierra didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was home. Sierra stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the quiet movement of the Hudson River below. The gala had ended hours ago, but she hadn't gone home. Neither had Quinn. They had spent the rest of the night walking the garden pathways, slipping in and out of quiet conversation, until the hotel staff politely began winding down the lights. Now, inside the suite, the city glowed through the enormous windows behind her. She could hear Quinn in the next room, his voice low as he wrapped up a call in French. She didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, decisive, clear, final. The door clicked quietly as he returned. "You're still here," he said, stepping into the soft wash of light beside her. "I didn't want to leave," she turned toward him. "I thought maybe if I stayed long enough this would feel normal." He stepped closer. "Does it?" "No," she admitted, "but I think that's okay." He watched her for a moment, then reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I wasn't going to give you this tonight, but I think you should see it." She hesitated, then took it from his hand. As she unfolded it, her eyes scanned the page. It was an offer letter on Keller Holdings' letterhead, her name printed at the top, Director of Community Impact Initiatives. She looked up slowly. "You want me to work for you?" "No," he said. "I want you to work with me. You have ideas I don't. You see things I miss. That day we met, you didn't just tell me your life was a mess. You told me what needed fixing. I want that voice in the room." She exhaled. "I'm not trained for this." "You are. You just didn't have the title." Her fingers tightened around the paper. "You're not offering this because of us. I'm offering it because of who you are. Us or not, you deserve the chance." She was quiet for a long moment. "So if I take this, what does it mean for us?" "It means I stop pretending you're just someone I stumbled into. It means we figure out how to do both work and life without losing what matters." "And what matters?" He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You." Her chest rose sharply. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to really hear it. I'm listening. I've spent most of my life afraid of being someone's afterthought or their secret. I've been invisible in rooms, forgotten in relationships. And I told myself that was safer than being truly seen. But you didn't make me feel small. You made me feel like I was supposed to take up space." She swallowed hard. "I love you." His hand froze in her hair. "I didn't mean to. I didn't plan to, but I do." He didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms and held her like the world had narrowed down to one person. "I love you too," he said into her hair, "and I'm not going anywhere." She pulled back enough to see his face. "Promise?" "With everything I have." A soft knock interrupted them. Quinn opened the door to reveal a young woman holding a small leather folder. She handed it over without a word and disappeared down the hall. He opened it and smiled. "What is it?" Sierra asked. "Final approval. The community center renovation in Harlem, the one I told you about last week." "It's happening." Her eyes widened. "You're funding the entire thing?" "We're funding it," he corrected. "If you'll take the job." She looked down at the offer letter again. "I will." He took her hand. "Then let's get to work." 6 months later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd of over 200. Children ran through the newly painted halls, their laughter echoing against the freshly installed windows. Sierra stood beside Quinn, microphone in hand, as she addressed the crowd. "This isn't just a building," she said. "It's a promise that we see you, that you matter, and that change doesn't have to come from the top. It can start right here." As the applause rose, Quinn leaned in. "You were born to do this." She turned to him, beaming. "So were you. You just needed someone to remind you." He kissed her then, not caring that cameras flashed or that half the city watched. It wasn't about the spectacle, it was about the moment. Later that night, they stood on the rooftop again. This time, not alone. Staff from the center, families and friends filled the space, celebrating with music and food and laughter. Quinn wrapped his arms around Sierra from behind. "You know," he murmured, "I was going to wait until your birthday." "For what?" He reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I don't care if it's fast. I don't care if it's unconventional. I want to build a life with you." The work, the chaos, the quiet, all of it. She opened the box, hands trembling. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single, perfect sapphire set in gold. "Say yes," he whispered. She turned to face him, eyes glistening. Yes, they married 3 months later in a garden at sunset. No press. No fanfare, just close friends, candlelight, and the sound of the river behind them. Quinn wore no tie. Sierra wore bare feet beneath her dress. He whispered, "I love you," before the vows even started. She said it back before the minister could finish. And when they walked hand in hand down the aisle, the world didn't fade away. It fell into place. Their days moved quickly after that. Meetings, travel, projects. But every morning began the same, with coffee, shared silence, and a kiss that always lasted longer than logic allowed. And every night ended with Quinn pulling her close and saying, "You're still the best thing that ever happened to me." And Sierra always saying, "I know," because some stories don't need fixing, some just need to be lived.